Krupa's moving up. This is 1930. Red Nichols and his 5 pennies. He's now playing with a fabulous clarinet player named Benny Goodman. They're working together a lot more. This song is unbelievable because Benny Goodman's solo, it's sort of like if you imagine when Jimi Hendrix hit the scene, you know, you can't believe what he's doing on a clarinet. Now, I'm not sure if that's actually Krupa or not.
It's not.
It's not, but I just got this picture to show what the band would have looked like around that time. That is Benny, though, right? On the clarinet? I'm pretty sure that is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's Jack Teagarden on trombone, too.
That actually may be George Beebe without his temple.
Without his temple blocks, yeah. So, you know, I looked, but I could not find a picture of Krupa with Red Nichols. It's not easy to find. I also love the name, Red Nichols and his 5 pennies. Very cute. Very 1920s. Again, you can't hear the drums very well at all. And it's not because Gene wasn't probably doing great stuff on this live, but just in the studio, very limited as what he could do. But it's up-tempo. Now this is Red Nichols. He's a cornet player. Let's see if I can find Benny's solo. Listen to this. It sounds like an electric guitar solo, right? So although today we think, oh, clarinet, how quaint. This was Burnett. So you could tell the intensity, even if you can't hear all the things that Krupa is doing. It's intense, you know, and that you captured just what was great about it. Any thoughts on this, Brooks?
I think that pretty much sums it up, yeah. Although he was limited as far as what he was allowed to play by engineers, not musicians.
Right. Certainly, we want to say that the limits on what a drummer could do was not from their fellow musicians, but by the engineers, you know. And they were often panicked about these things. By the way, one of the other misconceptions about Gene Krupa is that he was the first to record with a bass drum on a record. That's bogus. Others had done so earlier, and that's a whole other conversation, but people will often say that, credit that to Gene.
It's those damn interwebs.
Interwebs. Yeah. Okay, so now this is just a year before or 2 years before they record Sing Sing Sing, and this is the trio. So for those of you who the big band era, the big band was the main feature, but many of the big bands would break down at one point in the show and do a trio. And a lot of times those trios did not have bass players. So you think, oh, a band's got to have a bass player. This is from the movie Hollywood Hotel. It's a couple of years later. But Teddy Wilson on piano, Benny Goodman, and Gene. Now notice the drum set's looking an awful lot like what we got here. So let's hear some of this. And now it's 1935, and Gene has started to really establish himself as a star. Benny Goodman is now a band leader, and Gene is stepping out and really becoming, you know, the first, I wouldn't say the first, a lot of misconceptions that he was the first drum soloist. That's not true either. But he really took the position of the drummer to a new place. So for those of us as drummers who've had the chance to solo or be featured, again, before Gene Krupa, it was a much different story. Drummers literally were there to keep good time and to be quiet, you know, in general, at least in terms of the recordings. But Gene you just couldn't hold back the dynamism of his personality, his energy, his intensity, and his showmanship. You know, he was a fantastic showman. Now, what's cool about this is you don't miss the bass player because you have a big bass drum underneath and you have a strong left hand on the piano player. And so often these miniature versions of the big band had no bass. They were bassless. No problem, you know. What's cool is there's only 2 musicians playing here, and yet it feels like a whole band. Beautiful little break. Notice Gene's playing on his snare drum. He's not necessarily playing a lot of hi-hat. All right, so, yeah, let's hear it for Gene Krupa. So by 1935, now they could record the drums pretty well, and Gene was like in the right place at the right time. He was the right person to be able to really step up. And of course, by 1935, Benny Goodman and his band, they are sort of the ones credited with kicking off the big band era, the swing era. And because you have a larger band now, 18 pieces, the drummer could start to play out. And Gene, who in his own right is becoming a star, has some sway with the Slingerland Company, and they start to develop these essentially dual tension tunable tom-toms. So he uses the dual tension tunable tom-tom on this song, Sing, 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 and suddenly the drummer has a new vehicle to be heard. Okay, so before we get deeper into the song itself, I'm going to have Brooks come up, and he's going to talk to you about what you're looking at, because I know there's a lot of vintage drum fiends here. Before that, any other quick questions about where we are up till this point? Everybody good? Everybody breathing? Yes.
How do you go in about billing for a soloist?
How do you what?
Go in, like, you know, as in billing in for, like, a solo.
How did he fill in for a solo?
Yeah.
It's a little broad of a question. One thing I will say about Gene Krupa's style that people don't realize is that by 1935, the hi-hat was a prominent timekeeper. The hi-hat showed up around 1929, 1930, and by 35, it was starting to be used as the primary timekeeper on a drum set. However, you know, things don't change overnight. We think, oh, the hi-hat showed up in 1930, so therefore by 35, you know, the old style playing was gone. But Gene Krupa and many, many other drummers still played, you know, the old style. Because that's how drummers have been playing for 20 years, 30 years, you know, since the beginning of jazz and even before that, ragtime drumming. So, you know, what you'll find is on the original recording of Sing, 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 he barely uses the hi-hat and barely uses the ride cymbal, and he actually plays on the snare, and then a lot of it is on the tom-toms. All right, so let's have Brooks come up and share a little bit about this amazing instrument.
I don't think, that's fine. Actually, that one or the one before, either one's fine. I don't think there's anybody in this building that doesn't know what a Slingerland Radio King is, so we don't need to go into all that. This is the basic set that, I'm not projecting enough?
No.
You're the voice actor, too.
Right. Yeah, but there's usually a microphone, right? There's one already there, man. I don't know what to do if I don't have one. Okay, maybe behind you would be safer, unless you want us to hang you.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
There you go.
Can't hear you.
Thank you.
This is the set that Gene would have used as of January of 1938. In other words, not quite this one yet. He didn't get the second floor tom until 1939. Very important detail, because a lot of people get that wrong. This was also a tom mount that was not made in 1938. It was actually no longer made as of 1941. Discontinued. Same tom-tom. Gene used this tom with the seam facing forward, because he flipped it around, from probably its beginning in 1936, finally retired in 1945. Same 13. This is his all-time favorite crash cymbal right here. 13-inch thin, A. Zildjian. Finally gave that away to a student. That's not even 17 inches in diameter. 14, medium heavy. What now would be classified as a ride cymbal, in those days, if you have a copy of Gene's method book, you will hear him talk about the best use of that cymbal being played with the tip of the stick. As in, before it was a ride cymbal, it was a ride cymbal, but nobody called it that yet. He gets credit for naming that one. We all know what that was, okay? All Radio Kings, one of his beloved cowbells, with a very rare mount that you can look at more closely on here. He had a number of cowbells, some nickel-plated, some not. This is probably the one that you'd see or hear in Carnegie Hall. A Greco cymbal, Slingerland catalog referred to it as the Egyptian cymbal. It did have a little tone. He did play it. Listen to Carnegie Hall. Listen to Johnny Hodges' solo on Honeysuckle Rose. And you will hear him playing the Greco and then alternating with the wire brush cymbal. You can hear that because of the great overhead mic. Little details. First use of the bass drum with this style, number 549 streamline, large streamline look. Yeah, okay, it gets a little weird. First use was Carnegie Hall, January of '38. Before that, the picture that preceded this one, that bass drum now exists at the Smithsonian.